Pakistan has done remarkably well when it comes to environment. It's a half glass full if we follow that approach. But the empty part has to be filled in a collaborative fashion. And this approach that we followed, IUCN, Ministry of Climate Change, and renowned experts were associated. We are pleased to have Dr. Qamar-uz-Zaman Chaudhry Saab, who has been part of this process. There have been quite a few experts who have contributed in putting together a climate change and gender action plan on regional and international level. Today, I must say that last week, 10 days back, when I met with Madam Minister, I said that we are planning to launch climate change and gender action plan. And I think we were expecting her presence, Madam Minister and the Secretary Saab, since both of them, they were out of country. This partnership that has been coined for the purpose that lessons that are not doing well, effective implementation. And for this purpose, we have distinguished presence of donors, like we have Madam Ambassador, Head of Delegation from European Union. We have representation from Italy, France, we have representation from US, you name and all these distinguished esteemed embassies are with us today. We have CEO and DRMF. You are going to listen all of them, but my just couple of submissions. One, that I think that shows a commitment that we be candid, and whatever that support that we can provide for effective implementation, that has to be brought on board. It is not necessarily funding-wise. If the program is, one commitment is made to have gender focal points, for example, in different ministries of the donors, we have a start. I would also like to say this process approach that has provided us hundreds of participants, both male and female. When it comes to climate change, we see that female is heavily impacted, and the way that extreme events are happening. Internationally, we recently received World Economic Forum's report that ranks Pakistan not very well. It is better than only Afghanistan. So that is a benchmark, ladies and gentlemen, that we will have to turn it around. I would also like to cite a couple of examples. I think in 90s, then when I was working for FAO, we happened to develop this first female extension service, and I developed this curriculum for the female extension service. Today, that extension service is providing services to all over Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and the other parts of the countries are lost. Federal Forestry Board, when we were presenting findings of the Green Pakistan 10 Billion Tree Tsunami Program, there we said that female involvement has to be enhanced. And I am pleased to report, day before yesterday, when we had this count, I was told that 8,000 female have been associated, involved. 102 women, they have got jobs, forestry nagabans. So this is a start and long way to go. When I read this World Economic Forum, I think we will have to educate them better. We are a data deficient country, and we have to present ourselves effectively for getting these pictures done. I greatly appreciate IUCN's team, and I am sincerely thankful to all the ministries, to all the partners, and specifically Ministry of Climate Change, Madam Minister, Secretary Saab, and their team. They have been exceptional in providing their support. IUCN Pakistan team remains there to work together with donors, partners, for effective implementation of this action plan. Once again, on behalf of IUCN Pakistan, I welcome to all the distinguished delegates and look forward for the proceedings of this today's launching ceremony. This is a gracious moment for us to have all of you with us today. Thank you very much, ladies.
Moving towards climate change gender action plan, and we are going to know about the key highlights of this plan. But if you are posting any few hashtags, that would be shown on the SMD, and I'm going to share that. Hashtag ccGAP. Hashtag, that means climate change gender action plan, and hashtag climate resilience for all. And soft copies of this plan have already been provided to you via USBs, and if you need the hard copies, so you can leave your details at the registration desk. So for presenting climate change gender action plan, kindly welcome Ms. Fauzia Bilkis Malik, Program Coordinator, IUCN Pakistan.
Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to see the interest in the Pakistan's commitment to gender climate action. So this is really an amazing moment which I was waiting for. Like me, we started this process about 2.5 years ago, and most of you been part of this. And before I start with this, I start with a thank you for the contributions and being there for the process, which is for all of us. And the most important thing I want to say is that, I mean, in this gathering, usually we talk about if there is a gender balance, but I think there is a gender balance today, and I think it's a bit overwhelming that probably more women than men, which is a good thing to have that balance for both the genders to be supporting each other for this whole process. So we will go into the presentation. I would present to you the process as well as the highlights of the action plans. Just to quickly mention about the, where should I click? Yeah, the mission and vision of IUCN. So the whole process is basically aligned with the IUCN vision and mission. A just word with word that values and conserves nature. And the mission: influence, encourage and assist societies to conserve the integrity and diversity of nature and ensure any use of natural resources equitable and ecologically sustainable. So this also carries the
civil society, our dear guests from the diplomatic and donor community, and representatives from the government, the Ministry of Climate Change, on behalf of the Minister. Assalamu alaikum. I was very delighted when our country representative Chima extended the invitation. I never hesitated to come, and that's for 3 reasons. First, it's so nice to be back in Pakistan. It's been 10 years since I last came here, and I was glad one of the sectors in our plan is on agriculture and food security, because that was the hat I used to play when I did projects here many years ago. Secondly, it's a marching order from my boss, the Director General. So last month at the World Economic Forum in Davos, so our Honorable Minister, Madam Sherryman, met with our Director General, and she had a very specific request to IUCN to be able to support the country in Pakistan on the various climate risks, especially the most vulnerable and most at-risk populations, including gender, and specific hazards such as forest fires. So that's the reason why I come here today. But there's a more personal reason why I'm very interested in being here. Climate and climate change as themes are not really something I, as a professional, simply study or work on. I grew up in the Philippines, one of the most at-risk and climate vulnerable regions in the world. And so to me, it's not just about studying and working on climate change. I did live and survive the many disasters and typhoons growing up as a kid in a small, very tiny island on the Western Pacific Rim. And so this is the passion that I have and the rest of IUCN bring to the partnership. To us, it's not just because we do this as a project, as part of our work. We do this because we have the commitment, we have the passion, and we are part of the global community to make a difference. Now, this project in particular is unique to us because this was launched at the onset of the COVID pandemic. So today we talk about resilience. I don't think there is no better example of resilience than this project when it had to survive and be implemented through all the limitations that the COVID pandemic placed upon us, the dialogues and the visits and the meetings. So to me, this project in itself is the best example of resilience. And for that, I congratulate our team at IUCN and all of you, our partners and donors, for what we have achieved and for what we are celebrating today here in this particular event. Now, it's been mentioned earlier by the other speakers about IUCN. I often get asked, I'm relatively new to IUCN, and I joined also during the pandemic, and that's the reason why I only get to travel and visit you here today. We are largely known for being the world's largest and oldest environment organization, but the one thing I'm always proud of as part of IUCN is we are also the most diverse.
Recording
Diverse in the
progress.
sense that the union, which represents us, consists of the many different constituents and stakeholders in the global fight, in the global effort for conserving nature and the risk against the risk for biodiversity loss. We have state members, and we count 93. I'm very proud. 3 weeks ago, Maldives officially joined us as a state member, and coming from South Asia. And so we have this intergovernmental identity that we have. But more than that, we also represent over 1,300 NGOs, universities, civil society organizations. We have ministries representing us. And I'm very proud that in the last Congress we had in Marseille, we launched 2 more membership categories to recognize that there are 2 key stakeholders and partners in this. Part of the IUCN membership now includes indigenous peoples, communities, not represented by others, but they themselves sitting in our governance. And just last month, we approved the newest category on subnational entities to recognize that much of the action on climate change goes beyond the national government and national governance. So we now have cities and provinces and subnational government entities forming part of IUCN. And this is the diversity that we not only celebrate, but we also seek to mobilize. And today's event is a great example of what we are as IUCN and what you represent, which is our convening power. I'm truly amazed seeing all of us today and the balance that is represented. But more than that, bringing different voices from government, civil society, and our other partners together in the same event. But let me also emphasize that while we celebrate the output of this project, which is this plan, the work doesn't end today. It's just the beginning. Much still needs to be accomplished. This project is going to be continuing until the end of the year. And to me, that's the most important one, translating what is in the pages of these documents and getting them integrated into the design and implementation of actual activities, including Pakistan's plans and initiatives in climate change. That, to me, is the best test of how well we have done our job. Now, yesterday, I met with our Pakistan National Committee, and we have over 40 member organizations here. And that's why I'm very positive we can take this from plan into action. I was overwhelmed, and here in front of me is our chair, Mr. Romy. I was very much overwhelmed by the commitment and the passion that our members have demonstrated yesterday, have shared with me, for a just society that values and conserves nature. And that, I think, is the best example and the best contribution of the country. Let me also invite you to think beyond the boundaries of this project and what it can do at a larger scale. First of all, this is one of the two initiatives we have in Asia. It's actually Pakistan and Bangladesh leading the way in developing the ccGAPs. Now, there are many other countries just in this region alone that could benefit from the examples, the challenges, and the lessons learned. In IUCN, well, we serve over 170 countries. In Asia and Oceania, which I cover, we have 48 statutory states, all the way from our office in Fiji and the South Pacific countries, New Zealand, all the way here to Pakistan. This is the greatest product and asset that you could actually share for the rest of the region. And we in the regional office in Bangkok would be very happy to promote that. Well, also we speak of gender today and women being disproportionately affected. Let's also think beyond. Within gender, and I was over dinner last night, we were talking about, not speaking of women, for example, as a homogeneous group, but the intergender dynamics, intergenerational, and beyond gender, what are those drivers of social exclusion coming out of climate change? It could be ethnicity, it could be conflict, it could be all these emergencies that we have. I've been busy the past days, for example, with our colleagues on our team in Sri Lanka and earlier in Myanmar. So I think the work on gender is a good example, but let's stop there, because there are many other drivers that affect all of us in our ability to bring a climate resilient future for all. In the process of doing this project, there have been developments in IUCN which I would like to highlight, and I think complements the effort that we have here in Pakistan. Last year, we also launched a new global commission. IUCN, besides the membership and the secretariat, we are proud to have 6 global commissions, which bring together 18,000 of the leading experts in different areas of nature conservation, environmental law, protected and conserved areas, environmental education. Our 7th and latest global commission is on the climate crisis, and our new chair has just been appointed, the former Minister of Environment from Peru. And so the work that we have here is also going to be an important contribution to the work of the commission. The other one, when this project started, it was under a global theme on gender. Since then, that theme has evolved to what is now called the global theme on inclusive conservation. Because inclusiveness in conservation work and in climate change, again, just goes beyond gender. So our team works, for example, on rights-based approaches and all the other elements that bring inclusivity to IUCN's work. We also are very proud that along the way we have established the nature-based solution standard. These days, in many projects, in many countries, in many meetings, many of us claim to be experts on nature-based solutions. Now, one of IUCN's global responsibility is the standard setting role. I'm sure you heard us about the red list or about the green list. Now, the latest is about nature-based solution. There are many NBSs around the world, but there is only one global standard, an NBS, which is the one set by IUCN, which is the reference for countries, for donors, and recently in Nairobi, in the UN Environment Assembly, was adopted as the official definition. Now, we in the region and globally here in the country will be promoting those standards, including certification and third-party assurance, to ensure that as we talk about and implement nature-based solutions, we are adhering to the standard, along with the other global standards that IUCN have placed. We also look forward to today's discussion and its contribution to the many other dialogues and conversations happening in the coming months. In October, we'll have the Davos of the environment in Jeju Island, IUCN. We're going to have the key leaders of the environment convening, and again, we have invited the Honorable Minister to join us. It's called the Global Leaders Forum on the Environment. And of course, we are all gearing up for the continuation and the completion of CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and now we know it's going to be taking place in Montreal. Finally, as again we go back to what we are doing today, ccGAP, the P is very important, it's the plan. But more than that, if you ask me, of the 5 letters there, actually the most critical is the A. Because if we stop with the P, we are not completing our mission. So we must commit from today and onwards that we remember the most important is not just the plan, but actually the A, which is the action. Because it is only through that our commitment to our donors, including the Green Climate Fund, and all of us who are represented here, that we have truly fulfilled our role and contribution to a climate resilient planet for all. Thank you very much.
Distinguished Dr. Dindo Campilan, distinguished Mahmoud Lachima, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. It is an honor to be invited to this launching session here and to share my remarks and thoughts about this subject with you. Representing an organization, the German Development Bank KfW, whose focal area here in Pakistan is climate and energy, I can clearly say, from a practitioner's point of view, the Climate Change Gender Action Plan is a very useful document. If someone still doesn't understand the connects between climate and gender, this is the plan to read. And it rightly states, if the country is to tackle the climate challenges that lie ahead, it cannot do so without the full and equal participation of women. Earlier, we already heard the ranking of Pakistan on the Global Gender Index. So I would say there is a lot of potential to work on gender issues and thereby tackle climate change. When I read the action plan, I focused on 2 chapters, forestry and biodiversity, as well as energy, as we are quite engaged in these 2 fields with our afforestation programs, and here we have a good collaboration with IUCN, and our quite extensive energy portfolio, be it hydropower, transmission, or renewables. The plan clearly describes the linkages between women participation and forestry and advocates, among others, for creating employment opportunities for women in this field to make activities in the sector more sustainable. This makes absolutely sense. Also in the chapter on energy that I read, the document clearly lays out how women are affected by the way energy is produced and used, as women in rural communities spend significant time gathering fuel for cooking and heating, and women suffer from air pollution caused by the use of polluting stuffs. Here, as in all other sectors, one key lies in the inclusion of women in the decision-making processes, and this is clearly mentioned in this action plan. In general, the actions proposed in the plan are manifold. Some are obvious, some are less obvious, but all are relevant, as we don't do enough yet. These actions can help reduce the gender gap and combat climate change, 2 very important causes at the same time. I congratulate you to this very useful action plan, and I hope that it will get the attention and visibility it deserves. And I can assure you, at KfW it will. Thank you very much.
The most beneficent and the most merciful. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Akhtar Chima for giving me this opportunity to come and share my views here. And I would also like to be grateful for him to invite me in this ceremony where the regional director of IUCN, Dr. Dindo, is the chief guest, and he has given so much of what IUCN is doing at the global arena, apart from what at the Asian level. Having listened to Fawzia Sahiba with regard to the overall scheme of things under the plan, that is the climate change ccGAP plan. I should say that as a matter of fact, the 7 or 8 important areas in a 6 objective timeline, you have really done something which we are required to take care of under the ambit of 3 or 4 of our national policies. That is the National Climate Change Policy, National Water Policy, and probably the National Food Security Policy. At the moment, our various policies are devoid of the in gender aspect, or you can say that they are good policies, but the gender aspect is not fully taken care of. I was in the morning talking to one of my friends here, and I was thinking that I'm going to raise this issue, although I'm from the government sector. But this is all the more important that now, when more than 50% of our population was affected during the 2010 floods, and there were about 39 to 40 million people affected, 10, 11, 12, and 14 floods, and of which what statistics that I have got is more than 52 or 53% were the women and the girl child. So this is the high time that all our national policies and then their implementation frameworks, and then finally whatever the project that we are going to take out of those policies and frameworks, those should have a very, you can say, concise, effective gender aspect, fully, you can say, mainstreamed into them. Just tomorrow we are holding a sort of a workshop on development of national water policy implementation framework, and we have kept 3, you can say, themes. Number 1 is water governance, number 2, water management and conservation, and number 3 is water resource development. I think that all these 3 thematic areas have much more room for them to consider mainstreaming gender aspects into that. May I also propose from this, you can see, podium that IUCN, when they have taken lead in the development of first ever, you can say, the climate change gender action plan through the financing of GCF and under the auspices of Ministry of Climate Change, they should come forward and let's join hand together towards that. And I'm going to inshallah talk to my secretary Sahab as well. Let's join hands together for climate change, national water policy, and national food security policy together, and how well the gender aspects are mainstreamed to them, so that whatever the national frameworks we are going to prepare for their implementation, those are fully encompassing all the aspects. Let's not forget that in 1991, when there was a big cyclone in Bangladesh, and about 91% of the affected people were basically the women. Thereafter, the women empowerment and women gender equality aspect was brought in the design of cyclone shelters, early warning systems, and the provision of, you can say, community services and all that. And that had improved to a tremendous amount with regard to development of their resilience from any natural disaster. With regard to Pakistan, I think that we are although moving forward, but we are far behind in achieving that. And please take me as one of the volunteers towards that. And Ministry of Water Resources, although we are engaged in mega development in development of mega projects and all that, it will be, a voice from outside, and probably from an organization like IUCN and maybe other similar organizations. But since you have a global presence, let's join hand together, let's raise this voice, let me be with you towards that, because in the end, the drought-like situation prevailing in the country, 1998 to 2003, and then the floods of 2010 and onwards, all those areas have very clearly brought out, the miseries of women and girl child, and how well those miseries can be converted into their mainstreaming into development and the economic sectors of the country in all policy planning aspects, in all projects and all that is the need of the hour. Let me quote in the end one simple example. In 2006-2007, we were implementing a project of Asian Development Bank, and one of the component of that project was community participation, and that was basically put into that project with the reason that whenever a certain flood protection intervention is put on ground, the communities living on both sides or either side of the river or any, you can say, nala, they are not consulted. By virtue of that exercise, so much of good that started happening there that the future operation and maintenance of that particular infrastructure in the form of flood embankments were taken care of by the local people, and a big majority of that were the local women. So my request would be that let's join hand together towards this, and specifically for the water sector, when we have said that we are going to reduce our losses by 33% at least by 2030. We are building water resources to the tune of 10 million acre feet, and we are talking about putting in place.
Dr. Rina Cuenca, Head of Delegation Commission of European Union here. So please welcome Dr. Cuenca.
Dear IUCN members, government representatives, stakeholders, colleagues. I arrived in Pakistan 3 weeks ago, so I'm absolutely delighted that this is one of the first public appearances I can make on two of my absolute favorite topics. One is climate change, and the other is gender. And what could be better than an event that brings the two together? In fact, my FAO colleague told me before the session started that this is the place to meet the climate movers and shakers, because everybody is here. So congratulations. The EU has a tradition of being a leader by example in the fight against climate change, from Kyoto to Paris. Greenhouse gas emissions in the EU are now 22% below that of 1990, while our economy has grown by 58% in the same period. So that crashes one of the myths that climate change is expensive and it tamps down on economic growth. In fact, the opposite is true. That's what we've seen anyway in the European Union. And of course, gender equality and women's rights also remain key priorities for the EU, and we need to accelerate that pace. So if I turn first of all to the European Green Deal, which is Europe's structural response, and it's a new growth strategy that sets out our ambitions to transform the EU into a resource-efficient and competitive economy with zero net greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. But the EU alone will not solve this climate crisis. So strengthening international cooperation is absolutely crucial for the EU also to be able to decarbonize power systems, advance bilateral trade, investment, and innovation in pursuit of the goals of the Paris Agreement. So the EU currently integrates environmental and climate change considerations in all aspects of its cooperation with partner countries, including with Pakistan. So the EU, its member states, and the European Investment Bank, which we fondly refer to as our bank, are together the biggest contributors of public climate finance to developing countries. In 2019, that number was 21.9, or almost 22 billion euro, and that was a 7.4 increase compared to the year before. But I mentioned Pakistan, and let me come back to Pakistan. The EU has been supporting climate change adaptation and mitigation in Pakistan for the last 15 years. Whether we're talking about hydropower generation in KPK, drinking water schemes in Balochistan, child nutrition in Sindh, reforestation or efficient water utilization, all of these are supported by the EU to foster climate change adaptation in order to improve food security and ensure sustainable natural resource use. For the current period of 2021-2027, and it's an odd period, but in the EU we have this odd way of creating, sort of establishing budgets that last for 7 years. Don't ask me why. It's a historical anomaly, but that's the way it is. And our current 7-year budget for cooperation foresees for Pakistan the aims of reducing poverty by boosting sustainable and inclusive green growth, modernizing agriculture and improving inclusive access to natural resources and energy, while supporting training and vocational education, and contributing to strengthening the rule of law and human rights and gender equity. We are putting 262 million euro into this 7-year program, into these specific priorities. But of course, in addition to development cooperation, we have a trade preference program that I'm sure most of you have heard about because it's been all over the headlines in the last several weeks here in Pakistan, and that's called the Generalized Scheme of Preferences, or GSP+, which encourages partner countries like Pakistan to step up its action on a number of measures, including environmental protection and climate change. And just 3 weeks ago, I guess it was the day I arrived, in fact, there was a very important mission, monitoring mission in Pakistan from our headquarters to look at implementation of GSP+. And there was a dedicated meeting with the minister to look at the area of climate change and environmental protection. But this is an event about two issues and the nexus of those two issues. So let me talk about gender. The EU has something called the Action Plan on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment in International Action 2021 to 2025. It's a long title for something that we have shortened to call the GAP 3. So this is the third iteration of this Gender Action Plan. It sets out an ambitious roadmap to empower women and girls to fully use their rights and increase their participation in political, economic, social, and cultural life. Now, in the area of climate change and environment, the GAP aims to increase the participation of women and girls in all their diversity and decision-making processes. And this should lead to more gender-responsive strategies and agreements on climate change mitigation, adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and sustainable management of natural resources and biodiversity. And we're strongly committed in the EU to implement the GAP in Pakistan in a continuous dialogue with the government of Pakistan, supported by our development and cooperation programs. As announced during the last 16 days of activism, the EU delegation is committed to lead by example and encourages EU member states and other development partners to take similar efforts. For example, at least 85% of new EU programs will have improved gender equality as an important objective across all priority areas. Let me close by applauding what Dr. Dindo said about the importance of focusing on the A and not only the P. The A is where, that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where we need to be focusing, in fact, the action. And not only on just the action, but teasing out those specific actions under these great sounding objectives of what we can concretely do, in fact, to bring these two areas together. When I was preparing for this event, then I asked my team in the EU delegation to focus more on the nexus between climate change and gender. And in fact, I think we can take inspiration from this report, this launch, the plan that we're hearing about today, because we have a bit to learn about bringing those two together. So thank you for the inspiration. Thank you very much.
So now I would request Ms. Florence, FAO representative in Pakistan, to come on stage and sit on your designated seat. That is next to Mr. Jiva. Thank you. So our next speaker would be First Secretary, Political and Public Affairs, High Commission of Canada, Ms. Amanda de Sedelier. Kindly welcome her.
Good morning, and thank you for having us. Her Excellency Wendy Gilmore sends her sincere regrets and is disappointed to be missing such an important event. She's currently actually in Balochistan, where climate change is indeed a growing emergency, especially impacting women and girls, especially considering this summer's heat waves and water shortages. Talking about how to practically combat climate change while also mitigating the risks and adapting to a new reality while having this keen awareness of the gender implications are certainly topics that are near and dear to our Canadian values and an area of mutual interest between Canada and Pakistan. So on behalf of the Canadian High Commission, congratulations to launching a national climate change gender action plan that's based on a consultative process. A practical plan that's informed by community voices is indeed a model to be celebrated. This is a great achievement and an urgent need. 2022 is a critical year for climate action. Countries must come forward with higher levels of ambition for reducing emissions, and it's also the year that many of us are celebrating the 75th anniversary of our relationships. Canada and Pakistan are celebrating that 75th anniversary of bilateral relations, and we've been having lots of conversations with our Pakistani colleagues on what that means. And we've agreed that combating climate change is a core theme that our relationship needs to keep advancing together. Canada has a strong history of supporting environmental climate change programs here in Pakistan, mainly with communities through our Canada Fund for Local Initiatives. You may also notice that there's a few Canadian companies providing alternative energy through wind and solar power here in Pakistan. Advancing the take-up of these alternatives are crucial in both Canada and Pakistan. So something I wanted to highlight today as we talk about action plans and how plans need to be implemented and take on those activities are some of those amazing professional and passionate civil society organizations in Pakistan who are indeed already at the forefront of spreading community climate awareness and finding ways to practically advance the environmental protection, managing waste, and establishing responsible tourism models. Partnering with communities in Chitral and GB has been a key area of focus for Canada. We've actually ourselves seen firsthand how the changing climate here in Pakistan over the last few years, especially as we've been traveling for our winter sports program. Each year we've been visiting communities to participate in their winter festivals, and we've seen how winters have become dramatically unpredictable, and we've seen the glaciers melt. In these areas, we've been watching the recent stories too of summer flooding and landslides. And this is where partners like AKRSP and the Mountain and Glacier Protection Organization are supporting communities by building irrigation systems, rehabilitating land, and contributing to food security. For the last few years, we've been listening intently to the youth of Pakistan, who are demanding a voice and action. Last year, our partner CARE brought forth youth from across the country to speak and lead on these issues. And this year, the Booney Environmental Academy will be holding their first regional youth climate summit. Their model of inspiring youth to learn about and take climate action through sports and art is highly effective, and we know will lead to change. As a core theme presented today, women and girls are always the most impacted by the negative impacts of climate change. And so partnering with organizations like POTA is important to us. POTA is working to amplify the voices of Pakistani rural women for climate change solutions. They'll be working this year across Balochistan, Sindh, GB to set up rainwater harvesting, to understand heat patterns and to track them and to set up early warning systems. And as today's action plan points out, women's voices and leadership need to be at the forefront of a successful action plan to address climate change, and there are already many women at the forefront. Our partnership with Charmaine Obeid-Chinois Soch Films this past year highlighted many of these female voices through a series of documentaries and a children's book on Pakistan's climate heroes, which, thanks to the help and support of Minister Iman, are being made available across the country in schools to inspire Pakistan's youth. So today we celebrate the launch of the Climate Change Gender Action Plan, and we look forward to seeing the change it brings. Congratulations and good luck. Pakistan, Canada, and the world need these plans to be implemented and to work. We're in this together. Thank you.
So let me say welcome to Judah from the Ministry, the Additional Secretary of the Ministry of Climate Change, who has just joined us and with whom we work very closely. So, dear Dr. Dindo and dear IUCN colleagues, dear government representatives, dear partners from the donor community, from the NGO, from the private sector, from academia, I would like first to thank IUCN and the Ministry of Climate Change for having invited us. We are actually really honored to be here today in this launch of the Climate Change Gender Action Plan led by the Ministry of Climate Change and IUCN, and very happy to see the commitment of all stakeholders and the number of people you all in this room are showing this commitment. First, let me commend the efforts made thus far by the government of Pakistan, including relevant agencies, to recognize gender differential needs and priorities. It's clear that issues related to women have taken an important place in the national policy agenda of Pakistan. And gender has been mainstreamed at the national policy level. We have the Climate Change Act, National Climate Change Policy, and now the Climate Change Gender Action Plan, where gender has been mainstreamed very thoroughly. So, as Dr. Dindo said and stressed, since the most important is the action, I thought I wanted to give you some reality checks, and very recent reality checks. Yesterday, I was in Lahore, had a validation workshop on a baseline study of our project, a large project in South Punjab and in Sindh, in district very prone to disaster, very hit by climate change and poor. And this workshop, we had done these baseline surveys. And we disaggregated the data, which we don't systematically do, but this time we had disaggregated data, and we looked at male-headed households and female-headed households and looked at the differences. And from that, we have three main messages which came out of these results. The first message is that female-headed households are poorer than male-headed households. They have less land, less livestock, and less access to social services. These, you will say to me, we know. The second one is about the analysis of food security using several indicators, such as the food for those who are working in the food security sector. We have the food insecurity experience scale, we have the food consumption score, etc. But again, female-headed households are less food secure than male-headed households, measured by those different indicators. The third message is an interesting one. We're looking at the resilience capacity of households. Since 2008, FAO has been at the forefront of efforts to measure the resilience capacity of the people to food insecurity and the effectiveness of resilience strengthening interventions. And for that, we've pioneered an index, a resilience index, which was used for the second time in Pakistan for these Green Climate Fund large project on agricultural transformation in Punjab and Sindh. And here we have the female-headed household again, which have a lower resilience capacity by 3 points than male-headed household. But what is extremely interesting is the structure of the resilience, which is different. And it shows that the resilience of female-headed household is much more based on social safety networks, social networks, and the capacity to adopt and to change in order to respond to a shock, a new situation. And when we look at the access to land, ownership of land, and access to hospital, access to agri-input market, access to food markets, the women-headed households are much less resilient on these aspects than men. So, what does it say? We still have to work on these resilience pillars, what we call these resilience pillars. So, it shows the launch of this climate change gender action plan is extremely timely. Why? It reminds us and it pushes us to do more in order to achieve our gender equality. Let me conclude with 2 points. Let me reassure you that on behalf of the UN system, you can count on our support for the implementation of the ccGAP, of course. Let me also acknowledge today the resilience of women in Pakistan and all over the world who continue to stand against multiple challenges, including that of climate change, discrimination, harassment, and violence. Thank you very much.
For your assurance and reassurances, and we look forward to work together. I wanted to actually formally welcome very, very distinguished presence of additional Secretary Ministry of Climate Change, Quaid-e-Azam. I know that he had multiple meetings today when Madam Minister and the Secretaries they were out of country, and they have arrived just this morning. I'm so glad to have distinguished presence of additional Secretary Saab in person, that he has spared time, and we are honored to have the proceedings under his able presence. Thank you very much, and proceed with the rest of the agenda, please. Thank you.
And share his views.
In fact, I am thankful for providing this opportunity to me. We are already taking a lot of time. So in fact, I just wanted to start with the basic document which required this today to develop this ccGAP. That was the climate change policy. In fact, I was the part of the UNDP team at that time who developed that policy in 2012 climate change policy. And recently, we have, in fact, I was again heading the team which updated the policy of 2021. Interesting thing is this, that when we are talking about that most of this Pakistani programs and documents does not give the appropriate
preference or importance to the gender issues. But interestingly, our 2012 policy have a one dedicated section for gender in 2021. And that policy, when we have updated it in 2021, we have also upgraded that section also. And interestingly, why we were, in fact, was able to give the appropriate importance to the gender issues in our 2012 climate change policy. In fact, I just wanted to, in fact, many of the, in fact, team members and the others who were guiding the team to develop that 2012 climate change policy are sitting here. And why we were able to get this importance at that time, gender issues, in that policy, I think the credit goes to those people. And some of my those friends are sitting here, and I think it will not be appropriate if I don't acknowledge them. And I am grateful that Mr. Ahmed Kamal, Dr. Ghuram Rasool, and Mr. Mahmood Chima, and UNDP, Mr. Amanullah, they are sitting, and some other friends also. So they were part of the team who was guiding this, our team to develop the policy. So this was, I think, a very appropriate way when we were developing this. So and now I come to this ccGAP, Climate Change Gender Action Plan. Again, in fact, I am part of the team of IUCN when we were developing this important document, and in fact the document to implement our climate change policies. So in fact, I will not go into the details of the ccGAP because Madam Fawzia have already in fact covered a lot of many things, most of the important things. So I will just stop here, and I would in fact like again to be thankful to Dr. The regional director of our IUCN, Dr. Dindo, for his presence in Pakistan, and I hope his presence will, I think, motivate IUCN to take up more climate change related projects in Pakistan. Thank you very much.
Honorable guests, distinguished members of diplomatic corps, senior government officials, distinguished academicians, colleagues, and most importantly, climate change and gender enthusiasts. It is indeed a great pleasure, and I would like to thank Chima Saab for giving me this wonderful opportunity for sharing a podium with such a distinguished scholars, experts, policy practitioners, and a number of other colleagues in the room. At the same time, I would like to welcome Dr. Dindo. I had the pleasure of sharing some thoughts with him in a slightly informal setting last night, and I found him, pleasantly found him very knowledgeable about Pakistan, and since he had a stint in Pakistan in his previous life. But I think most important thing which I found is that he's so expressively passionate about the challenges which Pakistan is facing, at the same time the potential Pakistan is having, both on the climate change and nature conservation, as well as on gender aspects. So this was a nice, pleasant evening. Thank you very much for having me and then sharing your thoughts with me. Now, coming to this important event and the launch of this ccGAP, I would say that this is extremely important, as well as the most fitting, timely, and to some extent a desperately needed effort and initiative. Now, why timely, why fitting, why desperately needed? There are a number of reasons, but let me just share a couple of questions, or maybe just throw a couple of questions, and I'm sure that the speakers coming afterward might want to take that on. Well, first of all, if we look into this, since we're talking about climate change, and if we look into the climate policy perspective, international climate policy perspective and development in the UN-FCCC process, what we know that the recognition for the climate action and the impacts were very well recognized at the very early phases of the UN-FCCC processes. If we look into the 1992 convention, there are very strong references to the gender aspects of it, gender inequalities, pre-existing gender inequalities. At the same time, there was this concern, even at that point in time, that with the climate action, with the policy coming into the full motion, the wheels going into the implementation in several parts of the world, including countries like Pakistan, it is going to have adverse impacts, and it is going to increase gender inequalities. But nevertheless, I think all the policy developers and the practitioners, we took our good sweet time, and we are here today in Pakistan when we're seeing this kind of a very instrumental piece coming together now. But anyway, it says never too late. But when we look into it in a very honest manner, I mean, there are studies after studies, and there's a very credible data which very clearly show that gender disparities in climate change vulnerabilities not only reflect pre-existing inequalities in societies, but they further reinforce them. At the same time, we know that from our experiences, observations, and the number of people who have been a lot more instrumental in this area rather than me, but we see that inequalities in the ownership, the control of household assets, rising familial burdens due to male-out migrations, declining food and water access, increased disaster exposures seriously undermine women inequalities, and it increased the disparities. It translated into many adverse impacts such as economic independence, enhanced human capital, and inability to maintain the health and the well-being of the food insecurities. My previous speakers very eloquently articulated some of these areas, so I'm not going to go into too much details into that. So, but at the same time, there is a silver lining, and what we are seeing, especially the kind of a pressure which is coming from both ends. The one is very much the bottom up, which is when we go and we implement the projects and interventions, either they are in the climate change, the classical climate change interventions, mitigation, adaptation, or they enter into the DRR and DRF and other areas. What we are seeing is that the women and the gender aspects and the inequalities, they are becoming visible, and there's a pressure from the ground that these need to be careful.
Dear participants, it's indeed a great pleasure to see so many women here. I think I've never been to an event in Pakistan with such a great women participation, so congratulations to that. I think that's very important, and great to see you all here. Congratulations, of course, first of all, to IUCN and the government of Pakistan for launching this climate change gender action plan. This has been a very inspiring morning already, and I know the list of speakers was very long, and it's still some on the list, so I promise I will be very brief. But it's indeed a great honor to speak here and stand between all these, as my colleague from the ambassador from the European Union, the representative, has called it the movers and shakers. So it's a great pleasure to be here and step in for my ambassador. I was very happy to learn that Pakistan is one of the first 23 countries who have launched a climate change gender action plan. Considering that Pakistan is a country where gender equality is still a constant challenge to day-to-day life, this is a very important step. More than that, I think all over the world, no matter how your country is ranked in the gender gap ranking, I think climate change is still primarily seen as a scientific, technical, or economic problem. We recognize the human consequences of climate change, but still, despite all the gender mainstreaming that we are all aware of that we need to do it, we still do not focus enough on the gender dimension of climate change development. I did a quick research also on the national German policy, and I found out that there is no government-owned process of such a gender action plan on climate change. So once again, congratulations to Pakistan for stepping forward here. Dear Dr. Dindo, I had the pleasure to meet you yesterday, and you told us about IUCN assessment, where IUCN can continue to bring added value among all the other environmental and climate organizations out there. And I think this is a very good example that IUCN here certainly did, so congratulations to that. Pakistan and Germany have joined hands under the Pakistani and German Climate and Energy Initiative. It is an umbrella partnership which includes a high-level and political dialogue that we have been continuously following up during the last year, and it also gives us the task and the mandate to expand our climate change portfolio in Pakistan. Already this is one of our focus areas, and Germany's portfolio, the current portfolio on climate and energy related projects, add up to over 400 million euros. There have been already so many warnings, extreme weather events, directly threatening people's life. We have heard these wake-up calls, and therefore building resilience and adapting to climate change is one of our main focus areas in our bilateral cooperation. I think that the climate change gender action plan is a very timely and very apt call to all of us, that we always need to consider gender aspects in our project plannings. And you have heard my colleague from KfW and also my colleagues from GIZ. I told them this morning that I will participate in the launch of this plan. They were very excited to hear about that, because for them as practitioners, this is really a useful document for planning and implementing the development projects in the area of climate. In this regard, I would like to highlight only one project of the German government that we are financing here, and it has been mentioned here already as well, which is our support to the Billion Tree Program, where at BMZ, my ministry, the Ministry for Economic Cooperation, finances the third-party monitoring implemented by FAO, IUCN, and WWF to make sure that the afforestation program here in Pakistan will continue in a sustainable manner. And one of the key elements, and the key elements of success for this monitoring, is to include the women and the communities, especially the women living in the areas where afforestation is taking place, to make sure they are the benefiters of these programs as well, and they take ownership in the tree planting, and they also can get the fruits out of these efforts. So I think this is a very good example where the gender aspects and our efforts to improve biodiversity and climate mitigation in this country is already very well combined, and IUCN, WWF, and FAO taking great leadership in that. So I'm looking forward to continue on this on this path, making sure, I quote once again, I think that was really nice, that we do not stop with the P, but we focus on the A.
Ms. Chima, the members of the IUCN team, my fellow colleagues, representative of the government, and our foreign guests, members of the diplomatic community, and members of the civil society. It's been very long and a very serious discussion, and I have noticed that once one of our speakers says, "Thank you very much, how delightful your faces are." So I'll be also mercifully brief, because I'm a professor, and once we get a podium, then we never leave. So if I say that, can you please bear with me for another 30 minutes, I want to see your response. And there is our host here, she keeps on telling us that you have just 2 minutes to speak. So this nation remains to be distinguished. In many ways, right? We are very intelligent, we are very beautiful. We always remain on top wherever we are. Now the gender parity index, we are top from the bottom. And in terms of increasing our population, we are the top nation in the world. So we are increasing our population. The Honorable Secretary is here, he'll bear me out. One of the most important aspects of the national security is the population. Whatever we are talking about, the climate change, the gender gap, population is key to it. And once, even in terms of a few days in the world, when you look at the air quality index, we remain at the top, right? So these are a few things which makes us very distinguished. If we decide to do something, we are very capable of doing it. Now, I give you one example, that you are Dr. Dindo Campbell. We have to call you Dr. Campbell. Dindo, it's an easy word. So we didn't bother about your surname, and we all get away by calling you. So we are smart people. And first of all, I just wanted to, for the last 2 hours, you were so serious, and everybody was, most of you were on phone. I don't know whether you were updating the events of this or otherwise you were just passing time because of our boring speeches. But I am very proud to be a part of today's event. I joined along with my team, my deans, my chairman of the Environmental Science Department. We are all here, one, to support this activity, other, to be a part of this activity, particularly the implementation, because the universities are the places where we train youth, and we have to train a youth which is globally aware, which is environmentally responsible, which is socially responsible. So all these 3 components are part of this, your climate change gender action plan. We are one of the countries in the world who has been, like your own country, we are affected by the climate change a lot, and particularly the women. And while talking about the women, we divide women into different, areas, regions. Rural women, as like it's been said, living in the coastal areas, rural women living in the deserts, rural women living in the mountains, and rural women even living in the central Punjab or the more agriculturally developed areas. All these women are affected at the most by the climate change, because this year the Honorable Joint Secretary is here. Our winter was followed by summer. There was no spring. For that, the wheat production has gone less, and certainly we all know that we will have a problem of a food shortage, and it will impact the women. The other, this year, the mango production, I heard from South Punjab, is 35% lesser than last year. That is again because of the urbanization. We are changing the agricultural land into cities and developing housing societies. And the other is the increase in, certainly if we have an increase in population, we have to develop housing. And so 35%, we used to export $1 billion mango every year, and this year it is going down 35%. So it will certainly impact, because the wage which the women will get, particularly in the rural area, will be lesser. The other very important thing at the government level, the government representatives are here, we are here, is to stop rural-urban migration. And this is one of the major area which is impacting the entire dynamics of our country, because the agriculture is the resources. It's been told that 40% of the total workforce works in the agriculture sector. Now, I'm telling you one thing, which is that 80% of the household work in the rural area is done by women. 80%, because they work in the field, they contribute towards the economic affairs of their households. They also work at the house. But 80% of the women in our rural areas, they don't have bank accounts. They don't have any assets. And I come from a rural background. On this Eid, I was supposed to come here and speak. It's difficult to be a second last speaker, but I'll just take 2-3 minutes from you more. And 1% of the total bank account holders in my village are women. 1%. There are 7,000 accounts, and only 70 accounts are entitled in the name of women. And most of those women are from the rural elite, who are landed elite, and some were the working in school teachers. So the other women, we have to think very seriously. And I'm here representing a top university in the country, that we have to train our students, because in our universities, 52% of the total students are women, and we have to make them our ambassadors. Even we have to train and educate our male students to first be aware of this issue, and we cannot move forward and become a developed nation unless and until we work on it and remove this gender gap and make our women more financially empowered. We make our women more socially empowered, more politically empowered. You know, there are many regions in this country where women are not allowed to vote. We must recognize that first we realize this problem and then try to address it. And with this climate change, the heat, we did one project in our rural household, and you will be surprised to know that in some of the households, in the rooms where the women mostly stay at home, their temperature was higher than the outside temperature. And they were go to the deserts, go to the mountain where there's a lot of, temperature is below freezing, so there are no heating facilities. There is no sanitation in our rural setting, and the education, health, sanitation, access to clean water. And that is one of the reasons why people migrate from a rural setting to the urban setting, and then they settle in Kachi Abadis, and that bring another problem to the cities as well. So I think that we all have we all know what the problem is. We all have to be a part and a partner with IUCN, with the Ministry of Climate Change, with the Ministry of the Food Security, with the Ministry of the Agriculture, and that we are very well aware of this gender parity, but I think this will not help. We have to devise a strategy where, like solar energy, because in a rural setting, the timing of the load shedding is higher, so we can provide them with an alternate by helping them, by giving subsidies on a solar clean green energy, by providing them an access to the clean green water, to health, to sanitation, so that they stay in their own areas, they have these facilities, and they will work in a better environment. But the only thing which will change the entire scene is that we have to make them financially empowered. The women in our rural and urban setting, these women who are, I'm very delighted to see, but they represent the more aware section or a privileged section of women in our society. But we have to bring a woman from less privileged area, in an urban areas, or a women from the rural setting to functions like this, train them, make them our ambassadors, and even educate our rural men to be aware of the right of the women in their societies, and give them more representation in our social setup, in our political setup. But the only way forward is that we all know that there is a climate change, and it will impact the entire population, but it will impact the women more because of these things which I have already told. Once again, I want to see the smiling faces because I'm concluding. I want to once again thank all the speakers. I want to thank all the participants, and particularly IUCN, for bringing us together to actually deliberate, discuss on this very important issue. and be a part of the implementation strategy along with the government. We are all very delighted to be, and we'll be looking forward to work together. Once again, thank you very much, and I congratulate you all.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Muhammad Ali. So we are gathered here at the launch of Climate Change Gender Action Plan, and Ministry of Climate Change has a key role in it, and we are so happy to have the representative of the ministry, Mr. Qamar-uz-Zaman here, his additional secretary and Ministry of Climate Change. So I would like to invite him for his remarks.
Because I think the message from my minister was already recorded, and I don't know if you already played it or not, but anyway, I made a promise to Mr. Chima this morning that you won't call me on the podium to make a speech and bore the participants, but nonetheless, since given the importance of this topic, I thought it appropriate to talk for a few minutes. First of all, thank you everyone for being here. Dr. Dindo has come all the way from Bangkok, Mr. Chima, Professor Saab from the Quaid-e-Azam University, Florence, whom I've had the pleasure of working very closely on the Living Indus project, Living Indus initiative rather, and the ladies from the GIZ and the Canadian Embassy. Climate change is something which, as a student, we used to read about 15, 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And at that point in time, people used to think that it's an academic debate and it's not going to happen in our lifetime. But unfortunately, it's very real. And while at the Climate Ministry, in the last 3 years, I'm by the way, the longest serving additional secretary, or the secretary for that matter, in this ministry. So I've had some, repository of some experience of, as to what has happened within the past 3 to 5 years. This is something very real. And I speak from experience because in one of my past assignments up north in Gilgit, people used to conserve water for their winter crops. And I'm also heading one of the projects which is called the GLOF2 project. So I've had the pleasure of going up north again in the past couple of years. And over there, people that I talk to now, they say that they have stopped conserving water because the water melting is now a continuous process. It even happens in the months of November and December, which was unheard of in districts like Gilgit, Skardu, or Khizr for that matter, and Hunza. So, within my lifetime, I've seen, climate change impacting agriculture patterns, climate change impacting, within the city, I'm an old resident of Islamabad. My parents first moved to Islamabad in '77. And I vividly remember that in the winter of 1984, it snowed in Islamabad. And there was so much snow up in the mountains that where actually Munal is today, I saw with my own eyes people making a snowman. Now, this time around, as somebody just said, that, we have winters that too have shortened because of global warming. And we didn't have any spring this year. March was the hottest March ever recorded in the history of Pakistan. And I had the opportunity to going to Riyadh this spring. And Riyadh, which actually goes to 50 or 52 degrees centigrade in the peak of the summer. Riyadh was colder in March than Islamabad. And, I was talking to my Saudi friends over there, and I said, I thought that, I'll be, going around in, T-shirts and Bermuda shorts, but Riyadh was much pleasant than Islamabad this year. So these are the realities that we have to, now face. The Climate Change Gender Action Plan, I remember we kicked off this initiative, which was last year or the year before that, Chima sir? last year, March 2021. And I'm glad that, during my stay at the Ministry of Climate Change, this report has come out, this policy or action plan, and as the lady said that, we should focus more on action rather than plan. One of the things that I always crib about in the government is that we have, some very good policies which, sometimes, we just put it on the shelf and they never either see the light of the day or not implemented in the manner in which they should be implemented. And having served in the field in my early years, I'm more of an action man. I believe more in implementation rather than, having a, very nice world-class document. So the meat is in the action, the meat is in the implementation. So I would urge all of you to basically join hands with the government and make it a successful initiative. As you know that, when it comes to gender, we are sometimes daunted in the government by my colleagues that we always have either a female secretary or a female minister. And I've had the pleasure of working with two, female ministers here in the Ministry of Climate Change. So as far as the gender component is concerned, we kind of are cognizant of the fact and we make it a part of our, actionable kind of things that, we have a good, decent proportion of female officers as well as, people working with us in the ministry. One or two of the major initiatives which we are working on, one is the Living Indus initiative with which I worked closely with Florence. That also has a gender, component because, female workforce will be affected because of the dwindling water quality as well as water shortage when it comes to the river systems in Pakistan in the years to come. Our glaciers are melting very fast. We are becoming a water-stressed country very soon, and unless and until we do something about it very soon, the next 50 years to 70 years are going to be very, very tough for this country. And I say this from experience because, in the GLOF project, we've seen, water melting. And this year, in fact, we've had about 16 events so far, which were unheard of ever before. Before this, a GLOF is basically glacial lake outburst flood, which actually destroys, houses and, livelihoods, whatever comes in its way. So from the gender point of view, then again, when a house is destroyed, it's the women folk which get affected first because you don't have a kitchen, you don't have a roof on your head. Men can live out there in the tents, but it's very difficult for women to cook food for their family or to live outside in the open for weeks and months. So those are some of the challenges that are going to happen. So it's very important for us to become cognizant of these challenges and make gender mainstreaming and gender action a part of every policy and every initiative that government takes. So with those words, I don't want to bore you further, and I want to see a smile on all of your faces when I go back to my seat. Thank you so much.
And I would like to actually acknowledge the commitment and passion that we have received from Ministry of Climate Change. And I know that Madam Minister, when she was planning to travel abroad, she said that if I could not make myself available in person, this is something that I would like to record a message and send to you for display. I said, okay, I will send a team for recording the message. She said, I am self-sufficient and I will definitely send you a message for
Excellent.
this promise in the morning we received. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, let me welcome you to this exciting launching ceremony of the Climate Change Gender Action Plan of Pakistan. It is my profound privilege to be here, and I apologize for not being here in person because both women and climate change are very close to my heart, and I thought because I'm away for it to be appropriate to send you this recording, so do bear with me. And once again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being supporters and collaborators in this great enterprise. I also want to, at the outset, thank all stakeholders and key partners that have joined us in a vigorous consultation process to produce this robust document. The Gender Action Plan of Pakistan is prepared by the Ministry of Climate Change, as you know, and with the support of the Readiness Branch of the Green Climate Fund, and much support from the IUCN. So thank you, and please bear with me for a few minutes to share my enthusiasm with you about the subject at hand and what this report means to all of us. You do all know very well that Pakistan has been ranking among the 10 most vulnerable countries for more than 2 decades. It is on the front lines of climate change. You see it in front of you, and you also know that between the monsoons, the desertification, the glacial winds, the forest fires, the heat waves, we are now at the front lines of a great climate crisis that is running through the world, ripping through the world as we speak. And hope is not a plan, that we cannot just hope it will go away. So here we are with points and plans for every sector. Here we are with one of the most vulnerable communities in Pakistan, the women, and with the women, the children of Pakistan, who are always on the ground zero of conflict, of pandemics, of disasters, and of course they face the disproportionate effects of climate change, which Pakistan is clearly now acknowledging. The situation is complex, but it is very real. Women experience all kinds of predations when conflict strikes. Women are also the real agents of change when you need nature-based solutions, when you need any great transition to be owned by the people of a nation-state or a community. And it is the women that make that change a reality, not just from their homes, but also from their fields, from the fisheries, from our factories, and from the boardrooms. There are not many of us in power, but for those of us who are, it is an important responsibility to empower and disperse as much opportunity and create a scaffolding for that opportunity for women who are, again, as I said, in the trenches of extreme vulnerability, particularly from the trauma of climate change and the displacements and migrations that often we see on the ground. We don't experience it firsthand all the time, but especially in the cities. But as you see, Pakistan has been at really the front of a very, very tough year of climate stress, and the situation demands an integrated effort for those that are living on the margins, for those that have not enough of a voice in their decision making, particularly health, economic, education, and politics. Women have traditionally been the caregivers of a hidden care economy, not just in the world, but most so in Pakistan. This needs to be acknowledged in all our efforts, in all our policy making, in all our executive actions. And I think it is now really high time that Pakistan recognizes, and we are doing so today, the fact that climate change affects women and men and those in power and those out of power differently. Women clearly experience all stresses, all violence, all predations of conflict and climate stress very, very disproportionately. There is a whole encyclopedia of knowledge that now has led the world to come to such conclusions, but we see it on the ground every day. It is not just our business to narrow the gender gaps, but also to enhance the pace of climate preparedness and resilience for all, not just as a pragmatic policy, but also to be very, very clear in our intent, which is the twin actions of giving women higher opportunities, better preparedness, and mitigation against the extreme vulnerability they face when climate comes with when climate stress and disaster comes with no appointment. Here we are, and I'm sure much is going to be discussed. Women work closely with nature, women work closely with households, with making decisions on how resources are conserved, particularly water, forests, many other things, or how energy is saved or used. And these are all important, very important ideas and pointers to where we can take our planning, to where we can take our policies, and where we can build actual communities of change on the ground. So women can be agents of change, and very powerful ones at that. So with these words, I just want to once again appreciate the efforts of IUCN Pakistan to really put out all their efforts for important convenings that led to this report, and even for today, which has allowed us to develop this first ever climate change gender action plan. It will not only support awareness raising and capacity building, but our abilities to build bridges of collaboration between institutional silos that embrace a policy but are unable to unlock the momentum needed to foster and engage communities in real change. So while we have set ourselves up for creating good policies, they are the foundation of all action, executive action. I have to also say that it is high time that Pakistan revisit the nationally determined contributions submitted to the UN-FCC for including gender considerations more importantly and for mainstreaming them more effectively, because I think clearly in that document more needs to be done to include the women of Pakistan. We make the country's climate economy go around, but we also really are at the front lines of all change, if that is what is needed, and clearly it is. We can't all be a talking shop, and until you give and empower the tools of change to women and build resilience and bring them to the table in decision making for creating building blocks of resilience, you won't really see stakeholding on the ground for actually conserving resources and creating, overcoming barriers to enhancing mitigation and adaptation efforts in climate change. So once again, I thank the IUCN. I also would like to take this opportunity to invite the IUCN to assist us in this NDC review for a transformative engagement of women. We may not be reviewing other pointers in the NDC, but this one definitely needs a little bit of work, quite a lot of work. And so I use this opportunity once again to prevail upon your good offices, IUCN. And I look forward to working with all of you, with friends, with activists, with donors, and all those people who raise climate awareness on their own because they feel that it is their responsibility. Climate action is our responsibility. Let's take it now and let's prioritize women at the center of our policy. Thank you very much and best luck for today's function.